The leaders of the world's most powerful democracies are meeting in Japan for a summit likely to be dominated by Russia's invasion of Ukraine and by China's growing global influence. They're also expected to announce further sanctions on Moscow. Ukraine's President Zelenskyy is expected to join the leaders in person. Ahead of their official meetings in Hiroshima, the leaders visited the city's Peace Park. It's a memorial site to the tens of thousands of people killed by the first atomic bomb, which was dropped by the United States during the final days of World War II. Let's now go to DW's chief international editor, Richard Walker, who is in Hiroshima. Richard, Zelenskyy was expected to address the gathering via video link, as he often does. But now Ukrainian officials said he's going to be there in person. Why is that?
That's right, Gerhard. And as this news came out in the last few hours here in the media center in Hiroshima, there was definitely a ripple of excitement. And I think you can see what the appeal for Zelenskyy would be, to be on Asian soil, bringing his message to leaders here, not just in Europe and the United States, as we've seen him being recently. But also, I think particularly important for him is going to be bringing his message not just to the members of the G7, who are pretty much lined up behind him already, but also some of the what are called partner countries who have been invited to this G7 summit. Countries like, I think, first and foremost, particularly India. If we look at Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India, a very influential leader. This year, he's also got the chair of the G20, another major grouping, of course. And India, one of these countries that has tried to kind of walk a pretty neutral line on the war so far. It hasn't wanted to anger Russia, which has it has a long-standing relationship with. So for Volodymyr Zelenskyy, the opportunity to be able to even potentially get FaceTime with Narendra Modi and other leaders like him who've been sort of on the fence over the war so far, I think is particularly interesting for Zelenskyy at this point.
Richard, Russia has repeatedly threatened to use nuclear weapons eventually, but this year's G7 summit is now taking place in the city where the world's first atomic bomb was dropped. Is this symbolism intended, and is it playing into this summit?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, very strong symbolism here. And that Japan's Prime Minister, Fumio Kishida, he comes from here in Hiroshima. And earlier in the day, we just saw at the top there, he took the G7 leaders to the memorial, which you can see just in the far distance behind me there, the dome there that's become an icon of what happened here in 1945 when an American nuclear bomb landed here, killing 100,000, maybe even more people. And Kishida is preparing a statement which the other leaders will be signing on to, trying to reaffirm the G7 leaders' commitment to creating a world one day without nuclear weapons. But I think many will be wondering whether this really goes beyond symbolism, because the sad fact of the Ukraine war is that in many minds it's only underlined the continuing relevance of nuclear weapons. The fact that Vladimir Putin has been using them, has been making threats with nuclear weapons, but also the fact that Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons back in the 1990s to Russia, losing perhaps the ultimate protection, losing weapons that many countries looking on might think could have prevented that invasion from happening in the first place. So a strong message coming out from the G7 on nuclear weapons at the moment, but many questions to be asked about really how much of an impact it can have.
Now, Ukraine surely on top of the agenda there, but there's another potential crisis looming in the region there. That's Taiwan, which is the world's leading factory of semiconductor chips. But Beijing sees the island as a breakaway province. What role will that issue play at this conference?
Yeah, certainly we're going to see Taiwan featuring in the communique coming out at the end of this meeting. For Japan here, it's a particularly important issue because Taiwan is barely more than 100 kilometers away from the southern tip of Japan. So this is absolutely on Japan's doorstep, this issue. But also China more broadly, the discussion of how these rich democracies should deal with China trying to coordinate their positions is very much front of mind here. I think the the Americans and the Europeans, in briefing the media leading up to this, are both sort of suggesting that they've influenced the other towards their point of view, that the Americans have made the Europeans a little bit more aggressive towards China, the Europeans essentially saying that they've managed to tone down the Americans somewhat towards China, and the language that they're all kind of settling on is this idea that they want to de-risk their relationship with China to reduce vulnerabilities in their relationship, particularly their economic relationships going forward. The Chinese, for their part, say, well, they think that this is the term of decoupling, a term that's been used a lot, bandied around in recent years, that it's decoupling simply by another name. But we'll watch what comes out in the communique over the weekend, Gerhard.
Richard Walker there, DW's Chief International Editor. Thank you. The Peace Park in Hiroshima, which world leaders visited, is the main official memorial to the nuclear bombing of the city. Our next report looks at a much more personal form of historical witness, an 84-year-old survivor of the nuclear attack who welcomes visitors into her home to talk about her experience.
Guests are always welcome to visit Toshiko Tanaka in Hiroshima. And new visitors arrive almost every day. The 84-year-old has turned her house into a meeting place. Today, people have come all the way from Britain.
Hello, my name is Toshiko Tanaka. I survived the atomic bombing in Hiroshima. It wasn't easy for me to talk about what I'm going to tell you today.
Toshiko was in elementary school, a first grader, on August 6, 1945. On that day, an American airplane appeared in the sky, followed by a blinding light. She was 2 kilometers away from where the bomb detonated. She suffered painful burns.
On my way home, I saw many people coming towards me from nearby. All had severe burns. More and more people came because back then there was a stream here. They lay down and died. There were bodies everywhere.
She has since told her story to people from many countries. Toshiko knows people from all over the world, including in Ukraine. Nearly 80 years after Hiroshima, the fear of a nuclear attack has returned.
We were talking on a video call. I said, sadly, there's nothing I can do. I have hardly any money and no influence. But my friend told me, there is something you can do. You witnessed the horrors of the atomic bomb. Tell the whole world about it.
Ahead of the meeting of G7 industrial nations in Hiroshima, the city staged a youth forum. Toshiko Tanaka said she hopes a simple message will reach the attendees.
You told us to make friends with people from all over the world. How do we do that? Well, that just requires human kindness. Now, it might surprise some of you, but I have become friends with the grandson of President Truman, who ordered the use of the A-bomb. Putin should also visit Hiroshima, as should all other leaders.
The Children's Peace Monument in Hiroshima's Peace Memorial Park. Many of the victims were as young as Toshiko Tanaka was then. She says she also speaks for them. It's her contribution to peace.